Hello children, welcome to Social Studies digital class. Children, today we are going to discuss about social movements in our times, 20th lesson in your textbook. Children, you must have witnessed some of the movements in our country, or you must have seen the people fighting for their rights, isn't it? You must have also heard about the Telangana movement and even the workers' movements. So, those all movements are the loosely organized efforts of the people to get their rights. So, throughout the world after the Second World War, there were tensions within the countries regarding the inequalities which were there during those times, and people wanted their rights to get represented, people wanted their rights to be given to them. So, today we are going to discuss about social movements all around the world in this unit. So, let us begin. In this class, we shall discuss about the civil rights and other movements of 1960s, human rights, movements in the USSR, anti-nuclear and anti-war movements, globalization, marginalized people and environmental movements, Greenpeace movement. Children, so here you can see the slide of the people organizing an effort to get their rights. Let us study about the civil rights movements which occurred in USA. So, it was fought for the equal treatment of Afro-Americans or Black Americans and against the rules that permitted segregation of blacks and whites in schools, buses and public places, and discriminated against them in the appointments, housing and even voting rights. So, black people, the Negroes were not given equal rights regarding to what they were having those rights. So, they were denied of those rights, they were not equally treated with the whites or the white people, they were discriminated in the public places, in the buses, as well as they were also discriminated in the housing, appointments, and even they were not given equal voting rights also. So, this movement reached to its height during 1960s. It was largely non-violent, means people did not go for any violent ways, no bloodshed was done. So, it took the form of massive demonstrations, marches, civil disobedience, boycott of the discriminatory services such as the bus services were boycotted. The buses which were given to only the blacks, those were not used or utilized by these blacks, so that the loss occurs to the transport department and they accept those demands of the people. So, at that time a powerful movement was also going on in America, that is for the ending of segregation in schools. So, there were separate schools for blacks and whites, and the black children were not allowed to come to the white children's schools. So, on 28th August 1963, more than 2 lakh people marched to Washington demanding the passage of Civil Rights Acts and other things, such as they also not just they wanted the segregation in the schools to be removed, and also demanded for the generation of the employment, full and fair employment, decent living for the black men, and right to vote was also an important right which they were denied of, and integrated education system in which whites and blacks could study together. So, these are all were the demands of the civil rights movement and which were demanded by the black people to get their rights. Dr. Martin Luther King, the leader of civil rights movement, he expressed all these problems and all these sufferings of the people through his historic speech, "I have a dream." You can also go through that speech and you can also have an idea about what are the ideas of Dr. Martin Luther King. So, this was about the civil rights movements. So, these laws were subsequently passed, and after a long time, a lot of effort, many of them got effectively implemented. So, this became an inspiration all over the world for leading non-violent social movements for reform and change. Even different other countries also witnessed the movements. After the civil rights movement only, these all non-violent protests have been observed all through the world. It was possible to achieve equality for all the people through peaceful means and persuading the government to pass necessary laws. So, what was the thought of most of the people? That these laws could be implemented peacefully, demonstrated peacefully and can be achieved peacefully. The implementation is also possible if they demonstrate peacefully. There is no need of violent activities to take place. But there were also people like Malcolm X, so who was of the view that blacks should go for asking the separate state and should fight for independence from white rule. So, they also felt that in order to win, they will have to use all the means including armed conflict also. So, you can see what is the idea of Dr. Malcolm X, that his idea is even to achieve anything, we can also go for asking the violent, we can also use the violent methods so that they can achieve their targets if non-violent methods are not working. So, this is how the civil rights movement occurred, and during the civil rights movement there were also black women who also protested equally with men. Their voice was not identified, it was suppressed. So, a large section of people who actively participated in civil rights movements were black women who felt that their voice was not being heard, and even the movement was mostly dominated by men. So, these people, the women, they felt that the women needed to assert themselves, they have to get their identity for themselves for the equality of women. So, all these all these diverse streams contributed in building powerful movement for equality, which shaped the modern history of United States of America. So, this was about the civil rights movement, and even what are the two things we have discussed here? We have discussed the protest by the black people against the white, against the government, so that they can secure their rights and equality could be established, and among that there was also another movement by the women who also protested and who wanted to demonstrate to achieve the equality for themselves. So, women equality was also one of the concept of the civil rights movement. So, children, let us go for the next movement, human rights movement in USSR. So, in USSR and the countries of Eastern Europe, which were within the sphere and influence of the USSR, had a government which did not allow free multi-party system, free uncensored press or media, or even freedom of expression of movement for ordinary people. So, these governments were constantly under the fear of conspiracies to destabilize them and also kept a close control over all the activities of the people. So, what has happened in USSR? The government feared that there can be any conspiracy or secret policy from the side of the people and they may get destabilized. With that intention, the government never gave any freedom to the public, like such as they never gave the multi-party system, no political party was allowed to be established other than the government's party. Apart from that, the free uncensored press was there and even media was also not allowed, and even freedom of expression was also not there for the ordinary people. There was no even the movement, they cannot move from one place to another place easily. So, people grew tired, there were so many controls over them. So, people became so tired that many movements for human rights started in USSR. So, freedom of expression was not there, movement was not there, free to express themselves, free press was not there. So, people become so tired that they started protesting, they started the movements in Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, that is USSR. So, in countries like Hungary, Czechoslovakia and Poland, people demanded freedom from the control of USSR over them. So, here you can see this is Poland and this is Czechoslovakia and Hungary here, this is Hungary. So, these three countries were also the part of USSR earlier. Children, these movements also received support from two another countries, the superpowers. They were the anti-communist countries including USA and UK, United Kingdoms. This is USA and this is UK. So, these movements for human rights had many shades of differences. So, what are the different shades of these movements? That is, some people they observed greater freedom for common people. They found greater freedom for the common people, while others also found that this is a plan to dismantle the socialist system as it existed in these countries. So, one thing is that they demanded for the greater freedom, but some other view was also that this was to dismantle the existing socialist system in these countries. Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Andrei Sakharov, these were the important leaders of this movement. He is Alexander Solzhenitsyn and he is Andrei Sakharov. So, under their influence and also because of other movements that helped a new leadership emergence in the USSR under the President Gorbachev, who initiated a process of reform called glasnost to bring greater freedom for the people. Now, this was all happened in USSR. Now, let us study about the movements such as anti-nuclear and anti-war movements. So, the years of 1970s and 1980s saw a new kind of movement, the movement against war and nuclear arms. The entire world witnessed the horrors of nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the year August 1945. So, even after this has happened, the USA and USSR, Britain and France, they were compiling nuclear weapons. They did not stop observing the Nagasaki and Hiroshima incidents, and it has spoiled the land of those particular places up to the extent that they were not able to grow any crop over those places. So, despite of all these things also, the USA and USSR, the Britain and France, they began building arsenals of the nuclear weapons. So, they started building the factories of nuclear weapons in their places. So, the entire world was constantly under the fear of another world war. So, seeing this, observing this USSR and USA, the other nations, the people of other nations started fearing that there can be another world war. The third world war may take place. Thousands of scientists and intellectuals campaigned to abolish the nuclear weapons, and USA and USSR came to an agreement and they wanted to end the futile arms race. Futile in the sense fruitless arms race they wanted to end. There was a war that was taking place, that was Vietnam War during that time between USA and Vietnam. So, there was also the internal protest by the soldiers of America to stop the war with Vietnam because it was unnecessary to harass the people who were innocent. The bombing was done on the innocent people, internal places of Vietnam, so that the innocent people were being killed. So, the soldiers themselves realized and they went back to their places and they demanded that the war with Vietnam should be stopped. Thousands of citizens of America, they refused to participate and they doesn't want the innocent people to be killed. So, the nuclear arms race intensified after the end of. So, realizing that United States of America, seeing the protest from the soldiers' side, they decided to stop the war. So, after the war, what has happened? There was again a lot of demand from the side of all the people throughout the country, all the different countries to stop compiling the nuclear weapons. So, there were more countries competed with each other to stockpile under the nuclear arms. So, the nuclear arms race intensified after the end of Vietnam War as more and more countries competed with each other to stockpile nuclear arms. Companies which produced these arms were called as military industrial complex. The governments tried to create war panic among the common people so that they could support greater expenditure of taxpayers' money on nuclear arms. So, how did USA and USSR collected the money from the people to get an understanding that if they don't compile the nuclear weapons, there can be a war and you also may get killed and we may get defeated. With that kind of creation of the fear, they started collecting the taxes from the common people. So, gradually many people realized that the warmongering and the consequent arms race only make the world unsafe and increased possibility of a disastrous war for all the countries. And it not only affect the countries those who are going for the war, but also those countries which are in peace. For those countries also, this compiling of the nuclear weapons and also compiling of the arms and ammunitions may be more dangerous. So, massive protests took place all over the world against the government, demanding to reduce the nuclear arms and work towards these people started working towards the world peace. So, USA and USSR started after realizing that there were so many protests all around the country, all around the world. So, they realized that let us go for talking to each other, USA and USSR, and get to an understanding to stop compilation of the nuclear weapons and reduce the amount of the nuclear weapons also, the number of nuclear weapons also. So, they went to talks. The first talk was called as Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, which was not successful. For the first time it was conducted, it was not successful. Again in the year 1991, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty was signed by USA and USSR. It was called as START in the year 1991. By the time of 2001, this complex arms control treaty was implemented and 80% of the strategic nuclear weapons were removed from both the countries. So, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty in the year 1991 was successful, and by the time of 2001, there was the nuclear arms were reduced up to 80% all around the world. So, a little after signing of this treaty, the USSR was dissolved and in its place a new Russian state was formed. So, with this ended the long period of Cold War and the constant threat of catastrophic world war. So, people now relaxed, and even there was also another change that has taken place. What is that change? The change is that Russia is now, the other countries were given the freedom and it has been. So, all the countries in USSR were dissolved and they became the separate countries, and hence there was the power of USSR was decreased, and with this the world has relaxed that there will not be any third world war also. But this did not end the violence, that was only their imagination, but this did not occur actually. So, the world witnessed another war, the war between different countries, that is Eastern Europe, Iraq and Afghanistan. The countries were fighting among themselves. So, this is the USSR. Children, during the last phase of the existence of USSR, a major accident took place in its nuclear plant in Chernobyl. So, this caused the death of large number of workers in Chernobyl. Most importantly, not only the deaths has taken place, it was a disastrous incident, but at the same time there was also a lot of contamination of the atmosphere and large region affected, and even so many other countries of Europe were also affected because of that accident. Its effect created a new awareness among the people about the danger of nuclear power for peaceful and warlike purposes. So, it helped to merge anti-war concerns with the concerns of environmental protection. Not only one goal is there, that is not to go for a war. There is also another concern with which is linked with that. What is that? That is the protection of environment, which is also linked with the use of the nuclear weapons. If their nuclear weapons gets reduced, automatically the environment also will be safe. The other movements which were started were the globalization, marginalized people and the environmental movements. So, the economic and social changes happening worldwide since 1990s, which go by the name of globalization. So, there were number of economic and political changes have been occurring from the time of 1990s, isn't it? So, and there were, that was called as globalization, or it was also called as neoliberalism. So, which had an impact on the lives of the people. So, who were mostly affected here? Not the rich people, the poor and the underprivileged people were the sufferers there. Children, so what were the environmental movements? Let us try to understand. The poor, tribal and marginal farmers have been threatened by the commercial farmers, mining corporations and dam projects. What is the reason there? These large companies will find the natural resources such as minerals, rare plants, animal and water in the rural places, the tribal regions or the forested regions only. So, because to get the advantage of all this, these people, the rich people or the mining corporations or the commercial farmers, they started exploiting those places. They displaced all the tribal population from those traditional areas and they were made to go to the new places. So, due to this, the poor people have been reduced being the vulnerable sections of the society. So, along with this, such processes of development have severely threatened the natural resource base, giving rise to environmental movements that seek to combine the voice of marginalized communities with the anger over the destructive and violent nature of the development forces. So, here people, they were displaced from their places, that was the anger, and there were also the environmental crisis that was being created. So, there was a lot of anger among these people and those people started protesting against the existing systems. So, these environmental movements also were part of the social movements. One of such movement is Greenpeace movement. So, this movement initially started as a protest in 1971. So, against the American underwater nuclear test near Alaska. Near Alaska, there was an underwater nuclear test conducted by America in the year 1971. So, which spoiled the water of that particular place. So, volunteers set out a protest in a small ship to the test area and this ship was named as Greenpeace Movement and this eventually became the name of the movement. So, today it spread over 40 countries and its headquarters are in Amsterdam, Holland and has become an important international non-governmental organization. So, during the last few decades, scientists have discovered that pollution causes two different things. The first one is the depletion of ozone layer of the atmosphere, which is important to absorb the harmful rays of the sun. The second is the average temperature, if it rises, it melts the polar ice caps, resulting accumulation of water in the seas and oceans and increases the water level, which submerges the land near the coastal areas. So, such as there are number of countries such as Sri Lanka, Mauritius, India, Indonesia, which were very large, where large number of people live near the coast. So, all the lives of such people who live near the coast will come in danger because of the pollution. Greenpeace movement has taken up the impact of climate change across many countries. Its aim is ensuring the ability of the earth to nurture life in all its diversity. What is the major purpose of the Greenpeace movement? Is to bring a lot of change, bring the sustainable development all around on the earth and so that all the people live in peace. Children, see, over the years the movement has developed the ideas of sustainable development, that is the development which is environmentally sustainable over a long period and also just for all the people, both the developed world as well as the underdeveloped world also. So, the sustainable development should be possible for both, not only the developed world, it should be also for the poor sections, the vulnerable sections of the society also should be able to enjoy a good, peaceful and happy life. I hope you have understood the lesson in a better way and we also have another part of it with more number of protest movements that have occurred within our country India also. So, let us go for the evaluation part. Test your knowledge, children. Try to answer these questions. The first one is, what situations gave rise to occurrence of social movements all around the world? The second one is, write about civil rights and other movements in 1960s. The third one is, briefly explain the human rights conflicts in USSR. Fourth, who was Martin Luther King? And the fifth one is, write about Vietnam conflict. The sixth one is, what is Greenpeace movement in Europe? Children, I hope you have understood the lesson in a better way. Go through the textbook, read each and every line of the textbook so that you can understand all the concepts and also go through the worksheets also so that you can develop an understanding, read the worksheets. So, for better understanding of the concepts, go through the worksheets. Please visit the official site of SIET for the worksheets. There is also another session related to more number of movements in our country also, such as we have the Bhopal gas tragedy movement and there was also Nairobi movement. So, all these things we will discuss in the next class. Meet you in the next session, children. Until that, take care. Thank you.